Well, now let's get back to discussing events of the past 7 days. And just a reminder of my guests tonight. Samir Aita is the chief editor of Le Monde Diplomatic's Arab edition. Laura Angela Bagnetto is a journalist at Radio France Internationale. Anne-Elisabeth Mutet is a columnist for the Sunday Telegraph. And Billy Okademere is a journalist also at RFI. Thanks to you all once again for being with us. Now, our next subject is Somalia, where the crisis this week got worse. New figures claim that almost 30,000 children died from starvation in the last 90 days alone. Well, despite the arrival of aid in Mogadishu, over 3 million people are still in danger of dying of hunger. Well, the UN says the famine is spreading rapidly across the country and relief efforts are being hampered by the fact Somalia has been in a state of anarchy for almost 2 decades, with large swathes of the country under the control of Al-Qaeda linked rebels. Laura Angela, I'll start with you. No signs that this crisis is getting any better.
No, they just added 3 more districts in Somalia this week that are now hit with the famine. It's a major problem. There has been some aid that has come in, but not enough. The International Committee of the Red Cross has brought in some, but there's not enough people to distribute it. That's one of the problems.
And there's the added security problems as well. And today we saw the first signs of violence, didn't we? Fierce clashes, at least 10 people killed.
Exactly. And part of that has to do with food insecurity, because it was over food. Basically, they came in and, according to reports, they killed a bunch of people who were trying to get to the food. One of the problems is that it's there, but nobody can distribute it because of the fear of the insecurity.
So clearly it's becoming extremely dangerous for the aid workers themselves.
Definitely. And there's only a handful. There's only about a dozen who Al-Shabaab have allowed in. So that's also another problem.
All right. Now let's talk about solutions, Billy, because I want to talk about the African Union. This huge crisis is going on and they've postponed having a meeting about it until the 25th of August. This seems quite a strange thing to do given how serious this is.
Very strange indeed. Like the crisis in Libya, the African Union is again sleepwalking into this one. Its response has not been serious so far. It has only given $500,000 worth of aid in response to the situation. But let's forget the African Union is not a very rich organization the way the European Union is. But at least they should have shown political leadership by trying to draw the attention of the international community to this. It's like the world is acting while the African leaders are basically busy doing things which they shouldn't be doing in a situation like this. You know, for sure, even the Americans have started moving in. They have given some aid, of course, but they are putting it at the top of their foreign policy agenda this week. This weekend, the wife of the vice president of the United States, Jill Biden, is leading a delegation of American officials to Nairobi on Saturday as part of the assessment and the response, and to show that they really would like to act. As Hillary Clinton on Thursday issued a statement calling on Al-Shabaab to allow the aid workers unfettered access, at least. And the mere fact that they are doing that at that level, you know, making a direct appeal to this organization, which is considered a terrorist organization, shows that they are doing something. And, you know...
But there are reports, aren't there, that they do have funding problems, because Egypt and Libya, I think, were some of the biggest contributors to the African Union coffers. And, of course, with what's going on there at the moment, that means that funding isn't getting through.
That's the thing. That's a problem which comes on top of another problem. Many of the Africans would say, first of all, if, despite being the brute he is, the West shouldn't have gone into Libya and messed it up in this way. Gaddafi was such a good benefactor of the African Union, and Gaddafi would always be able to help in a situation like this. But now there's a stalemate in Libya, and the tens of thousands of other Africans have been displaced out of Libya, and there's a trickle-down effect on the economies of the countries from which they come. So this whole thing has been messed up. And then you have Somalia coming in, something which we actually saw coming over a couple of years ago, because you don't have a functional government on the ground. The government in Mogadishu operates only in parts of the city, and Al-Shabaab controls the rest of the country. They are probably the largest terrorist organization in the world, and now they can't even allow access to some of the people most in need. So it's a crisis that the world needs to take more seriously.
They're preventing people from leaving Somalia, trying to get to those refugee camps in Kenya as well.
Exactly.
So it's a very dangerous
especially
situation.
the men. They are preventing the men. They're allowing the women to go through, and some children, but they're preventing the men. So we don't know what exactly is going to happen after that. There has been some questions that probably does this crisis present the international community with a perfect opportunity to directly intervene in a more profound way in Somalia.
UN peacekeepers or
UN peacekeepers, which they have never decided. The only international force on the ground is the African Union mission in Somalia. 9,000 troops, which cannot even control the whole of the capital. At least they can control parts of the capital where the aid, the relief is arriving for now. But what about the other parts of the country?
Right, and what about aid? Because millions, billions of dollars have been poured into this region over the past few years, and yet we're seeing a disaster on an epic scale. How is this allowed to happen? Where's that money been going?
Well, there's a lot of problems with that. One of the things is that the U.S. had put the kibosh on allowing aid or any humanitarian organizations to distribute food. They just released that problem this week, so now anyone can help, which is a really big deal. Sheikh Sharif Ahmed, who is the president of Somalia in the weak transitional federal government, he was complaining that there was not a lot of coordination with Arab and African countries with giving out aid. So now Turkey has called on the Organization of the Islamic Conference to pledge money later this month to help them, to give an Islamic push to this, because there's a major problem.
Well, quite. Now, what about Kenya? How have they been in? Because Kenya, of course, is where all the refugee camps are, and these people from Somalia are trying to make it to these camps. They have been criticised somewhat, haven't they, for not opening up the camps on time and not providing access?
Well, that one camp, the second Dadaab camp, has been opened, but they're opening it in very small increments, which is the problem. The Dadaab camp is there's 40,000 people there, so basically what they're trying to do is trying to put more people into the new camp, but it's very little at a very little time. The Kenyans themselves, ordinary people, are giving money to help Somalis in need, which is really amazing. But
also let's not forget that Kenya has got its own substantial Somali community, and in areas which are also affected by this drought, which has affected much of the Horn of Africa, and so it has also to help its own people, and it has at the same time to deal with the influx from Somalia. And the big question for the international community is really, it's of course easier to help those who have already moved into camps in Kenya, but is that the best approach? How many people from Somalia during this season can actually make it into those camps? As you see, the UN already saying this week, and the United States saying that 29,000 children have already died in the last 90 days alone, and this is a country where no one has ever taken a census of anything. How many more have died, which we actually don't know about because there's no access into those villages to find out. So it's quite a huge humanitarian crisis, which I think they will have to respond to even in a bigger way than they responded to the Ethiopian famine in 1980s.
And what do you think about how the UN is dealing with this? Is this just kind of putting out the fire immediately? Is there any long-term plan to prevent this from happening again in the future? Is anyone taking responsibility for this in the long term?
Well, at the donor conference called by the FAO in Rome, much of the talk was about dealing with firefighting right now, of course, but also putting in place some long-term solutions for the locals to deal with the agricultural ecosystem. But you can only do that if you have political stability on the ground. So if you are going to deal with the situation, which is always actually recurrent a couple of years down the road, then you have to deal with the politics of Somalia first to make sure there's infrastructure on the ground in order to let the international organizations come in to help people deal with the irrigation, help people dealing with animal husbandry. So it's a whole complex thing which I don't think you can solve over a couple of weeks. They will save a few thousands of lives with the current emergency response, but this is something which is likely to recur unless they find a more holistic solution.
Okay, all right. Well,
am I astonished that nobody talks about Ethiopia and its role in the thing?
Ethiopia's role in the...
Yes, because it's responsible of the somehow the political mess in Somalia. I mean, the United States chose Ethiopia and pushed its intervention, and there was no deal between the two. So they have a part of responsibility and thing, as well as
But I think Ethiopia are affected by the crisis as well, of course.
Yes, I know.
Yeah,
but they have troops and they are responsible of the things. And the international community is somehow responsible of leaving Somalia to its fate between the Shabab and the Ethiopians. Let's say it this way.
Right, I think it's agreed it is a failure of the international community on all sides. All right, well, let's move on to our last topic for discussion tonight then. Developments in the Middle East, of course. 2 uprisings, both turning out very differently. In Egypt, a hugely symbolic moment this week when former strongman Hosni Mubarak was wheeled into a courtroom on a stretcher where he faced charges of brutality and corruption. He denied them all. It was a sight millions of Egyptians thought they would simply never see. Meanwhile, in Syria, where an uprising is now entering its 6th month, the arrival of the Muslim holy month brought the worst bloodshed to date. Dozens were killed in a matter of days when Syrian troops overran the city of Hama and other flashpoint towns in the region. The UN Security Council condemned the violence, and crucially, Russia toughened its stance on the regime, the traditional ally, calling for the violence to stop immediately. Samir, let's start with Egypt. Just the fact that Mubarak was in court was a victory for the revolutionaries in itself, wasn't it? They really did think this day would never come.
Yes and no. Yes, because, okay, he is responsible of the old politics. He, with his sons who tried to took over power after him or was in control of the economy, like Mubarak, are now in jail with the responsible of the security forces. And no, because somehow all this is like a show to cover the big difficulties that there were before, few weeks before, a few days before, between, let's say, the revolution, the people, the youngs, and etc., and the military committee. Because on different issues like the new constitution, they let the people vote on 2 articles of the constitution while the military made their statements. And people are asking really to build a new state with a new democracy, with a new way of doing politics. And the military seems not willing to do that.
But do you think it's important in terms of moving forward for Egypt from its autocratic path into a democracy? Do you think that this trial has to happen?
Yes, but putting too much media, public opinion, and etc., I'm always somehow suspicious about this. This always covers something else.
Exactly. We got indications from some of the people we spoke to in Egypt during the trial, the public trial of Mubarak, that much of this was mainly really to placate the youth of the revolution, as they are called.
Because they've been out on the streets again.
They have been out on the streets, and displaying Mubarak in a cage like an animal like that was in a way supposed to generate public sympathy for him from the greater Egyptian society, which doesn't seem to have happened. But it also seemed to have backfired in a way, because really the military not only have to go ahead with the trial and finish it to its own to its logical conclusion, it has also to bring in many more others and try them. Otherwise, and many of the human rights activists have actually been asking that Mubarak shouldn't only be tried for what he did in the last 6 months, towards the end of his rule for the past 30 years. And I don't know whether they will get a closure by that.
But they're calling this a test case. I mean, that's a big deal in itself. That this is the beginning of what could happen. People are looking very eagerly at how the defense is working, how the prosecution. In fact, there was a lot of criticism with the lawyers of the victim, the victims of the families of the victims, because they were not using their judicial background.
And there's a lot of concern about whether this will be a fair trial, isn't it?
Exactly, and so that's another point that needs to be brought up.
Absolutely, and one man who'll be watching that trial extremely closely and possibly being worried about it as well is, of course, Bashar al-Assad in Syria.
Yes.
Because this, it seems, is what happens to dictators when the uprisings are successful.
Yeah, first on Syria, I think Bashar al-Assad is finished, means politically in Syria. This is only a question of time. He had, contrary to Hosni Mubarak, all the assets to, let's say, move with the wave, what I call the youth tsunami in the Arab world. He made it all wrong. There was a funny slogan saying the regime want to topple the regime, not only the people want to topple the regime. They made all the mistakes possible, including this, let's say, stupid idea of coming and sending the forces everywhere in Hama, in Daran, etc., in the same time at the eve of Ramadan. This is really crazy.
Are you encouraged?
Nobody will accept.
Are you encouraged by Russia this week? Because Russia is a traditional ally of Syria, and it's Dmitry Medvedev's tone is getting a lot sterner. Do you think that could be a turning point towards some kind of action from the international community? We saw a statement. We don't even have a resolution on this.
It does only reflect that, let's say, the Syrian people and the allies of Syria go in private and ask even the Iranians or the Hezbollah are disgusted with this policy. It means no leader could send the army killing its own people, whatever the reason. Especially and this most of these this uprising is peaceful, people funny in sometimes and etc. This is shocking. Getting back to the thing on Hosni Mubarak and the trial, the problem is not revenge. People in Syria don't want to the revenge on any of the guys there.
But there were calls
they
today
want to
for the
build
first
something
time
else.
for al-Assad to face the death penalty. For the first time today, we heard protesters saying that, didn't we?
Yeah, but this is because they are angry and etc. But I think the political solution will have to because of the confessional things and etc. have to set, let's say, the form of the new regime before toppling it, and this is one of the major difficulty. And then I made a joke with one Egyptian colleague saying Syrians came late to the Arab uprising, to the Arab Spring, but they are moving quickly. Maybe they will get the things on the end side much faster than you. I mean, the situation is blocked in Egypt today. While the things now discussed inside Syria is really how to build the new system and how to forget about some of the killings and etc. because you cannot pass your time with trials.
Okay, all right, we're going to have to leave it there. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. Thank you though to all of my guests tonight, and thanks to you for watching. That's it for the world this week. We'll be back next Friday, and I'll be back with another debate on Monday. Business is next, followed by the headlines. Stay tuned. This is France 24.